So staying with this tension at play in attachment theory, Erica Berman writes, quote, "The apparatus of attachment theory thus either naturalizes class and cultural privilege or warrants state intervention." So attachment theory therefore designs gendered and racialized positions as natural, and in doing so, these positions become inevitable, located within the mind, where biology preserves the status quo. And also reinforces a single story of cause and effect into a universalized account of diverse and culturally situated experiences. So on page 150, Berman draws on Nancy Shepherd Hughes' ethnographic work, which considered child neglect in a Brazilian favela as something much more complex than assumptions based on bad mothering or deviant mothers. Rather, in these circumstances of extreme poverty, where infant mortality rates were over 70%, women had to find ways of dealing with the trauma of these large-scale deaths, where neglect was actually an act of family survival. Therefore, the medical technologies of attachment theory place blame on mothers for the effects of poverty rather than attributing this devastation to political economy. So there's a focus here on changing people rather than on environments and social conditions. So pathologizing and scrutinizing mothers, especially working class and young mothers, is particularly problematic here. So Berman writes thus, quote, "The locus of the deficit tends to revolve around the child's mother, culture, and class," end quote. And again on page 163, Berman writes that the ideologies of attachment and bonding both exonerate the state and provide scapegoats to account for the outcomes of seemingly thwarted affections in the form of socially inappropriate activity. So then, using a critical lens, we can trace some of the tensions of attachment theory and notice the knowledges it privileges and perhaps which knowledges it excludes. And moreover, we can consider what attachment theory does and how it positions women. So again, I invite us to stay with this question that we've been thinking with for the past 2 or 3 weeks. The question that asks, what are some of the ways in which societal and structural problems manifest themselves in individual bodies? So we've been tracing how developmental psychology places societal and structural problems inside the bodies of individuals. And this week, we've paid particular attention to how attachment theory works as a technology to position these problems inside mothers. So as you watch the short film by Sisters Rising this week, I hope we can also think about how attachment theory and discourses of developmental psychology might position Indigenous women, how attributing brain development and a child's future ability as located within the mother-child relationships veils ongoing acts of colonial violence that create conditions that create vulnerability and risk in the first place. So throughout this course, we've been considering the conditions and structures that create vulnerability and risk, troubling the idea that vulnerability and risk is something that's located within an individual body.